who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavang, it does. They need me.
Well, welcome guys. It's currently very early in the morning on a Saturday at the start of June, and I'm back. It's good to see you all. I know a lot of you guys have been wondering where I've been. It's been about, I felt like it'd been about 3 weeks since the previous part. No, I'm not changing the name of the series. It is still End of Dragons Daily. My ambition is to be daily as we go forwards. But yeah, I felt like I'd had a break of about 3 weeks here since the last part. I think there were a couple of streams more recent than that, but as far as this show. But last night, it was when I got a really concerned message from a friend, I realized that, time really was pushing. So, let's get the ball rolling. I've spent the past couple of days really taking stock of all the series and projects I want to do. As you guys know, when I didn't really have a PC that I could do most of the stuff I found fun, I kind of built up this epic list of a ton of stuff I was really excited to show off. And I really just needed to take some time to sit down and prioritize that. There have been a lot of other things going on in real life. Some of you guys have been talking about my mum and sending me good wishes about that. So, thank you very much to all of you for that. Another thing, a couple of weeks ago, I actually had a birthday. I've just left my 20s, which comes with all kinds of existential fears and worries about what I'm doing with my life. But we won't worry about those too much. I've got some great comments from you guys here, just as we roll on in. Token of Otaku says, Daily 77 is going to come out one day, and it'll be fantastic. Hopefully I'm all right. Well, here we are. We're at 77. Let's see what we've got. We'll kick the polls up. I think we still have some concept art to go through from the reveals before. And what's kind of interesting is, suddenly I feel like, we're in summer now. And the idea of big End of Dragons news, release dates, actual thoughts of when we'll really properly be playing it, feel more real to me now than ever. Don't forget, the only thing they have confirmed, is that it is a 2021 release. And while the first half of 2021's kind of already done, right? So, speaking of marketing and the idea of announcements, Graven, 2002. Is that your year of birth, 2002? That's crazy to me if so. Anyway, what marketing would we like to see leading up to End of Dragons? The window to speculate on that will be closing before long. And that's an interesting enough question on its own. I've talked loosely around this topic in the past. Specifically, I've mentioned you guys, I really prefer the way they did things with Heart of Thorns. And that's a little bit selfishly minded of me as a content creator, as someone who wants exciting news to share and discuss with you guys on the regular. I felt like Heart of Thorns did things amazingly, slowly filtering out the elite specialization information, really letting us indulge in all that stuff. And, maybe I could just retread those comments, but check out what the Ritualist says in response. Firstly, I would recommend they go to an ad agency and do this properly. Their communication strategy and community management is woeful at best, but personally, I would do a phased approach like WP's been suggesting. Number one, awareness. I would do a teaser with some mystery, which is what they kind of already did, to be clear. This can be done on social and EDM with countdown timers to release, build anticipation, etc. Okay, so for everyone reading this, wondering, okay, what's EDM? This person seems to have some education about online marketing and stuff. So EDM stands for electronic direct mail. I think it's quite an old term. The idea being that you could just blast a ton of emails all over the place, and that's how you get your marketing done. You go straight to the consumer and you just spam these things out. And in a modern context, it might be a little bit more broad scope than just spamming people with emails, but that's the general idea they're talking about. Demonstrate that something is coming. Maybe leave some Easter eggs in the visuals, but increase speculation in whatever way possible. And again, I kind of feel like step one was done. Maybe people don't really think about the End of Dragons teaser too much anymore. Maybe it's time to refresh that. It kind of all depends when the release date itself is. I mean, if we're only a few months away from the full release, maybe we're too late to indulge in one at this point. Number two, awareness consideration. When they start to do official trailers and give more solid info close to release, do some targeted posts to the Guild Wars community and the widened communities on Facebook, Twitter, other social channels. The social networks have great look-alike targeting abilities, so it would be easy to speak to the right people, existing customers and targets for conversion from other games. That sounds like a very roundabout long way of saying you want to make sure people are discussing this in important places, and not just the Guild Wars 2 subreddit, places like RMMRPG and so on. And places like that generally, will do that for you, I think, through just word of mouth. Enthusiastic fans kind of take the reins there, I think, a lot of the time. So, number three, CRM. So this stands for Customer Relationship Management. I went to Google for this. They'll have a wealth of usage data for every player. Once we start to hear more about the elite specs, email players with the top 2 professions they use the most, giving info on those elite specs. Offer loyalty rewards, discounted pre-purchase, for example, maybe an in-game exclusive. Number 4, engagement content. They can do this in multiple ways. Ideally, it would be personalized and relevant based on usage, but appeal to the player as much as possible. I.e., if they primarily play PvP, talk about updates there. If they play story content, introduce characters and plot points. They will have a wealth of creative assets they can use, but always being relevant is key. I don't know how much I believe in this idea that they can put bespoke information under the eyeballs of people who enjoy very specific areas of the game. I mean, are those communities really worth talking to in precise ways and spending a lot of time and money on when some of those communities are so small and fragmented at this point, you know? But maybe if there are more efficient, like automated ways of doing stuff like this. Potentially they could do a novelty piece. Maybe they could do a David Attenborough National Geographic style mockumentary of Cantha, talking about the flora and fauna, highlighting the design elements to create buzz and a laugh. I don't know, man. I mean, that reminds me a little bit. One of the big marketing initiatives they did, what, 2.5 years ago now, was they created a whole bunch of adverts. You guys might not have seen these or remember them, in which they were spoofing vacation ads you'd find on TV, like, oh, come to the Caribbean, and except it's, oh, why don't you come and visit us in the Grove? And they were like little snapshots. That reminds me of that an awful lot. Number 5, a launch event. Big live streamed Hullapalooza. Announcement, final ending of the countdown clock. Opening trailer sequence, 3, 2, 1, log in and go. Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines. May the best commander win. And of course, this would all be underpinned with strong CTAs. So that's call to actions. To me, conversion KPI targets, a KPI being a key performance indicator. This is so corporate, almost disconnected to me. Anyway, just some disorganized ideas from the top of my head. I hope they can do it justice. From a business perspective, it sounds like they need to. So yeah, just a really interesting comment to highlight, I thought, honestly, and a very fun thing to come back and read as I browse through some of the End of Dragons Daily comments here this morning. It's not often I face acumen and jargon to that degree in my comments. Right, next, let's go to Hyperborean Ghost, who says, thoughts on the JT fractal and whatever that boss was. Could the eldritch feel that boss has be related to Bubbles? The deep sea guy always stood out as something not like what we've seen before. Lost Sanity Return says the boss is a kraken. They existed in a different or smaller form in Guild Wars 1, but the aesthetic is there. They were encountered in the Jade Sea. I could see them reusing it in End of Dragons if they're smart enough. Yeah, I can see them reusing it as well. This idea that it is specifically a kraken, I can't remember all the like collection achievement text and all the dialogue and everything in Fractals. Do they specifically call it a kraken? Is that like absolutely canon confirmed? I mean, I can imagine maybe it is. I just can't find a source off the top of my head on that. To me, yeah, this kind of always did feel like a Zu Hanuku style thing. So in Guild Wars 1, there's a story very briefly in the Canthan campaign where you meet with the Luxons and you find out they have this big festival. I think it's like once a year, maybe it's once a decade, on some interval, where all the clans get together and they hunt this big creature, this kraken, and you know, you go out onto the sea and you fight it. And the idea of fractals is they're kind of like echoes of the past. They're like recreation, mini fragments of reality that rebuild and draw on actual history and real things that happened. They may not be perfectly accurate, but there's some semblance of truth to Tyria's true history in there. And that's what I always thought the Jade Maw fractal was, kind of like drawing somehow on the whole event of hunting Zu Hanuku, who, if I remember rightly, is quite precisely a kraken in Guild Wars 1. The idea that then they can still connect it to the Deep Sea Dragon, though, is open, as far as I'm concerned. A lot of the creepy crawlies and dangerous creatures around Cantha, many of them corrupted by the Jade Wind as they were, you know, and even draconic things, I think can all be linked to the Elder Dragons, to the Deep Sea Dragon, to the conclusion of this whole dragon story. I mean, it fits to me, so I'm expecting reuse and expansion on that story in End of Dragons for sure. The other thing is, you know, the idea that that fractal isn't quite like anything we've seen before. Well, there's a few examples of that, really, at the launch fractal set. Look at stuff like the Cliffside fractal and this giant monolith statue guy that we free. He's chained up. We don't know why. We don't know where he's going. We don't know whether he exists. He knows he's in a fractal and he's leaving it, whether there's like a meta story going on there. You know, they drop some real hints about very deep history and stuff that is completely disconnected from everything. So, you know, I actually think the Jade Maw is easier to draw parallels to and think about as a real thing in Tyria than like the cliffside fractals, certainly. And, you know, once End of Dragons is done and we're out of this whole story, maybe that's where they start looking. Speaking of the deep sea dragons, Sky My Guy says, I've got a topic. What do you think that the deep sea dragon might look like? Also remember, Wolf said that Primordus looked kind of like Kralkatorrik because the magic consumption had begun to scar his face. So maybe the deep sea dragon will look like a horrific amalgamation of all the dragons. That'd be incredible, not gonna lie. Well, that's a fun idea. I mean, when we were in the Icebreed Saga, they were talking about Cthulhu-esque horrors and things of like an eldritch nature, and then the saga kind of took a left turn and didn't really get to explore that stuff too much. So the idea that End of Dragons can now deliver on some of those themes and darker ideas is very, very exciting to me. The idea of a darker, more grounded, more horrific, scary world definitely appeals to me. I think it's something that Guild Wars 1 indulged in a lot more than the sequel did. Even when you're in scary places in the sequel, like in Ore at launch, everything's kind of fluffy and pulpy and fun and upbeat to a certain degree. You know, you'll be with Asura that are laughing and joking, and even though they're talking about death and zombies everywhere, you don't really feel it. And the idea that, you know, maybe this next expansion, this final dragon, is really dark and really creepy and really scary, and they really dive into it in all the ways that the Icebreed Saga was, and I loved about the Icebreed Saga while it was there, is very captivating to me. You've also got to think about, like, the movement of the world kind of painted this dragon in that way. That it was the horror of the depths. And I don't know how many of you guys like engage with the idea of thalassophobia, right? The fear of the deep and the open waters and the things that might be down there and the darkness and the mystery of not what... Fear in mystery, basically, is what the Deep Sea Dragon's all about, or historically has been. And now that we're in the expansion, yeah, I mean, some of that mystery, some of the curtains are going to be pulled back a little bit, but I think that they can still play with that horror element, and I'm excited to see them do it. Then, to pair that now quite elegantly with this whole idea that the Elder Dragons are really messed up. If you are the last Elder Dragon, and the Deep Sea Dragon is, and you've got all of this magic, and all of it's messy and chaotic and crazy. Well, it's not the last one, because Aureen's on the picture. I should amend that. You know, think about how it's just crazy and chaotic and unpredictable. And there's a fear in the unpredictable as well. So I think that this could be very fun. As far as how that like visually manifests, the devs can do whatever they want. I'm expecting a serpentine design. Now, they kind of hinted that maybe Kralkatorrik was a bit serpentine. If you look back at the end of Path of Fire and, like, the Balthazar fight, and you look in the sky, and you look at the way that Kralkatorrik looks as it turns off, it looks kind of snake-like. But then that wasn't really indulged in. Prime Jormag, we really only got its head. I mean, how crazy. We thought for the longest time Jormag was going to be that, and we only ever got Jormag's head, so, like... In a way, we still haven't really had an Elder Dragon that kind of properly does that design. Then there's this idea that if, like, Kunavang was its champion, similar to how Glint was Kralkatorrik's champion, and Kunavang and all the salt sprays are kind of that more Asian dragon sort of idea, maybe the granddaddy of them all is going to look like that too. But equally, I like the tentacle thing. I like the Kraken thing, a giant octopus. And the devs can be very creative as well. I really look back at, for all of its failings, Zaitan visually was an incredible piece. You know, where they really went quite extreme and weird with it. You know, multiple heads and just like this idea of all these bodies and dead dragons brought back to life and stitched together all at once. There's a lot of fun stuff that I think maybe the Deep Sea Dragon could look at there as well. Of course, all these decisions about how it looks have probably been set in stone at this point. It's weird to think, guys, but behind closed doors, there's probably a model of the Deep Sea Dragon either already created or in the process of being created, right? Next, we have Foal Oak, who says, one thing that bugs me is the Spanish translation for the saga. This is just a bit of fun trivia, guys. It's titled, oh god, Sangre y Hielo, meaning blood and ice. And that's weird because it's totally different from Icebreed Saga, focusing more in the char. The logo is red tinted too. Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of weird localization wriggles like this. I don't know whether there's really any meaning. I actually think Blood and Ice is a more fun name, but it's that exclusion of the word Saga altogether. Like, there's not even Saga there. So if you were a purely Spanish player, you had absolutely no capacity for English whatsoever, and you've been enjoying this franchise, and that's an interesting idea of a consumer, by the way. Did you know that they were trying to reinvent the wheel when they did the Icebreed Saga and all that kind of stuff? Or is that's just a new season, just the Blood and Ice season to you? That's quite fascinating, really. And finally, there's a huge topic here that I love, and I kind of want to turn back on you guys. Because, you know, the fallout of the end of Champions is something I still haven't really wrestled with, and I still really haven't let set in my mind and really come to terms with the fact that we're kind of in a very new place with the story at the moment. Roberto says, I would like to hear about your revised thoughts on what you would like to see story-wise in End of Dragons now that we know the ending of Icebrood. More specifically, what do you think would actually redeem what happened in the finale and make you say, okay, it was worth it? Maybe the answer is nothing, but I'd love to hear your passionate answers full of excitement about lore speculation, so maybe there's something. This is a fantastic question. And look, the cynic, the pragmatist in me, the realist in me is... I'm pretty much convinced the devs just don't want to do the Elder Dragon story anymore. And I think there's a good reason for not doing it, because it's a very old story at this point. It's a story many consumers aren't invested in at this point. It's a story that's too much baggage and back end for new players to learn and inhale before they can finally be invested in these future ones. The idea of just get it over with. So by the end of Dragons, we have a clean slate for a whole new era of Guild Wars 2, where we can do any number of stories that don't have all this baggage that you have to learn, and all this background, and all this Guild Wars 1 lore, and all that stuff. You can do some clean stuff. I think that's very compelling. And in some ways, does that redeem what happened in the finale? In some ways it does. I mean, it justifies it if those later stories were of a great quality. And here's the thing, guys. I mean, I'm very big on this idea that the concept doesn't really matter that much. It's just the execution. I really think you could pitch to me a story about Tyria in the world of Tyria that doesn't sound very good and doesn't sound very high stakes and doesn't sound very compelling. But if it's executed in the right way, it may come off better than any of this Elder Dragon stuff, really. I mean, I don't think that the Elder Dragon story is fundamentally way, way, way richer and way, way, way more novel or creative than any other story they could do. I really don't, and I think we see it in a lot of other products anyway. So if Guild Wars is just desperate to tell something different about Tyria, then go for it. My big concern is when I look at Tyria as a setting, as a fantasy setting, and especially one without Elder Dragons, I'm really struggling to look at what is the big thread we want to pull on next. What is the cool thing, the specific thing about Tyria that we're all so enthusiastic about? And it's kind of empty for that sort of stuff at the moment, I think. You know, I've talked about the idea, you may have missed it, I did a video literally saying, you know, where would we go after End of Dragons if we're continuing? And I mentioned, like, the idea of building to, like, a world war kind of thing, you know, where it's more interpersonal, it's more about the factions of the world and stuff. And maybe they could do that, but, you know, I'd be hard-pressed to really think about a lot of other stuff. One thing on my mind right now, we just mentioned the Cliffside Fractal and the Colossus there. Maybe it's those kinds of stories. Maybe it's the interplay of this physical realm and the mists that should be explored. So I want to turn it back on you guys. For the next part of End of Dragons Daily, that will be our topic. Give me any comments you like about that. I'll also have the concept art ready for you on the next one. We'll go through the polls. And thanks for all the lovely comments over the past few days, guys. Let's keep on rolling through summer and see what the devs have got in store for us. There's been a ton of patches and other kind of news as well, so keep an eye out for a video on that too. I kind of need to do a bit of a roundup, a bit of a catch-up for you guys, which I think is only fair. So I'll see you guys for that very soon. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.